The sky above them was no longer blue. It had turned orange and gray from the fires that burned across every continent. Smoke rose from cities that had stood for thousands of years. The beautiful forests that they loved so much were now nothing but ash and dead wood. Ambassador stood at the top of a broken tower and looked at the destruction around her. She was a bird-like creature with soft feathers that once shone like precious gems. Now her feathers were dull and covered with dust. Her large golden eyes were tired from crying and from not sleeping for many days. They had come 3 months ago. Nobody knew where they came from or why they attacked. They were like giant insects with hard black shells and sharp claws. They did not talk. They did not make deals. They only destroyed and consumed everything in their path. Billions had already died. The survivors were running out of places to hide. Walked down the broken stairs to the emergency communication room. Only a few technicians remained there, working on machines that were old and damaged. One of them, a young male with gray feathers, looked up when she entered. "Ambassador, the signal array is ready," he said. His voice was weak. "But I must ask again, are you sure about this?" Nodded slowly. "We have no other choice. The Galactic Council will not help us. They say they are too dangerous, that helping us would put their own worlds at risk. Our neighbors have closed their borders. We are alone." The technician shook his head. "But though the stories say they are monsters, their planet is called a death world for a reason. They breathe poison. They eat fire plants. They hunt for fun. The Council locked them away from the rest of the galaxy because they were too dangerous." "Yes," said, "and right now we need dangerous." She moved to the communication panel and began to type in the coordinates that every species knew but nobody used. The coordinates of Earth, the forbidden world, the home of the humans. The message was simple because there was no time for long words. Spoke into the microphone with her last hope. "This is Ambassador of our people are dying. A species called thee is destroying us. We have asked everyone for help. No one has come. We know you have been separated from the galaxy. We know the stories about your kind, but we are desperate. If anyone can hear this, please help us. We will give anything. We will do anything. Please." She pressed the button to send the message. Then she sat down and waited. Far across the galaxy, in a place where no alien ship had traveled for 300 years, the research vessel moved quietly through space. It was not a military ship. It was built for science, for exploring distant stars and studying strange planets. The crew was small, only 45 people, and most of them were scientists. Lieutenant was on duty that night. She was 26 years old, with long black hair that she kept tied back and eyes that missed nothing. She had joined the space program because she wanted to discover new things. She had never expected to discover anything like this. The signal came through her communication screen like a ghost appearing from nowhere. It was weak and broken, traveling across distances that should have made it impossible. But the computer recognized it as an organized message, not random space noise. Sat up straight and adjusted her equipment. She cleaned up the signal, removed the static, and played it back. The voice that came through was strange, like a bird trying to speak, but the words were clear enough. Someone was asking for help. Someone was dying. She reached for the internal communication button. "Captain, please come to the bridge. We have received something you need to hear." Captain Park arrived 3 minutes later. He was in his 50s, with gray hair at his temples and deep lines on his face from years of hard decisions. He had been a soldier before becoming a captain, and he had fought in the border wars when he was young. He knew what suffering sounded like. He listened to the message twice. His face did not change, but saw his hands tighten on the back of her chair. "Where did this come from?" he asked. "Outside the quarantine zone, sir. Very far outside. I traced it to a star system in what the old maps call the region." Said the name like he was tasting it. "I remember reading about them when I was in school. They were one of the species that voted to lock us away, said we were too violent to be trusted." Looked at him carefully. "What do you want to do, sir?" The captain was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the stars through the window of the bridge. Somewhere out there, people were dying. Aliens, yes. Creatures that had feared humans so much they had helped build a wall around Earth. But still people. Living things with families and hopes and fears. "Open a channel to Earth Command," said. "Emergency frequency." The connection took several minutes to establish. When it did, a face appeared on the main screen. It was Admiral, Commander of the United Earth Fleet. She was 63 years old, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. People called her the Iron Grandmother, and she had earned that name in a dozen battles. "Captain Park," she said. Her voice was calm and cold. "This is unusual. Research vessels do not normally use emergency channels." "Admiral, I apologize for the interruption, but I have received a transmission that you need to hear." Nodded to, who played the message again. The Admiral listened without moving. When it finished, she closed her eyes for just a second. When she opened them again, something had changed in her expression. The coldness was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that looked almost like hunger. "Captain Park, maintain your position. Do not respond to the transmission yet. I am contacting the Defense Council immediately." She paused. "You did the right thing bringing this to us. Many captains would have ignored a signal from outside the quarantine." "With respect, Admiral, I do not think any human would ignore someone asking for help." Admiral almost smiled. "Almost. No, I do not think they would. Stand by for further orders." The screen went dark, looked at Captain with wide eyes. "Sir, what happens now?" The captain turned to look at the stars again. Somewhere in that direction, they were fighting for their lives against an enemy they could not defeat. They had reached out to the one species the galaxy feared, the humans from the death world called Earth. "Now," Captain said quietly, "the fleet responds." The word spread across human space like fire in dry grass. Within hours of Admiral, report to the Defense Council, every military base, every ship and every colony knew what was happening. Someone had asked for help. Someone was being destroyed by monsters, and humanity was going to answer. On Earth, in the great underground command center beneath the mountains, Admiral stood before a wall of screens. Each screen showed a different ship, a different commander, a different piece of the human war machine waking up from its long sleep. For 300 years, humans had been alone. The Galactic Council had decided that Earth was too dangerous, that the species living there was too violent, too aggressive, too strange. They had built a barrier of warning beacons around the Sol system and told all civilized species to stay away. Humans were quarantined like a disease. But humans had not wasted those 300 years. They had built ships. They had trained soldiers. They had prepared for the day when the galaxy might need them, or when the galaxy might threaten them. Now that preparation was about to be tested. "All fleet commanders, report status," Admiral said into her microphone. "Carrier ready for deployment," said the first voice. There was the largest ship in the human fleet, a flying city of metal and fire that could carry 5,000 people and 200 fighter craft. Heavy cruiser, engines at full power. Cruiser, weapon systems online. Cruiser, medical bays prepared for casualties. The reports continued for several minutes. 37 warships in total, ranging from massive carriers to small, fast destroyers. It was not the largest fleet that humanity could assemble, but it was what they could gather quickly. And speed mattered now. Every hour of delay meant more dead. In the engineering bay of the chief engineer was shouting at his team. He was a large man in his 40s, with thick arms covered in burned scars from decades of working with hot metal and dangerous machines. His voice was loud enough to be heard over the noise of engines and welding tools. "I want those capacitors replaced by tomorrow morning. I do not care if you have to take them from the practice targets. This is not a drill. We are going into real combat against real enemies, and I will not let this ship fail because someone was too lazy to check the power systems." His second engineer, a young woman named Bora, ran up to him with a tablet computer. "Sir, the reactor is running at 92% efficiency. Should I push it higher?" Thought for a moment. Pushing a reactor too hard could cause it to fail, but running it too low meant less power for weapons and shields. "Take it to 96%. We will need every bit of power we can get, and tell the cooling team to be ready. Things are going to get hot." Bora nodded and ran off, looked around his engineering bay with something like pride. His people were scared, he could see that. Most of them had never seen real combat, but they were working anyway, doing their jobs, preparing for whatever was coming. That was what humans did. They felt fear and then they worked through it. On a different deck of the same ship, Sergeant Major was training her Marines. She was a small woman, barely over 1.5 meters tall, but her body was made of muscle and experience. She had been a soldier for 25 years, and she had killed more enemies than she could count. Now she was teaching others to do the same. "The R," she shouted as her soldiers ran through combat drills. "That means hard shells, multiple limbs, and no mercy. They do not take prisoners. They do not negotiate. They eat what they kill, so we are not going to give them anything to eat. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant Major," the Marines shouted back. One of them, a young man named, was struggling to keep up. He was 19 years old, fresh from training, and this was his first deployment. His hands were shaking as he tried to assemble his weapon in the required time. Walked over to him. The other soldiers expected her to shout, to punish him for being slow. Instead, she knelt down beside him and spoke quietly. "Private, look at me." He looked up. His eyes were wide with fear. "Your hands are shaking because you are afraid. That is good. Fear means you understand what is happening. Only stupid people feel no fear before battle." She put her hand on his shoulder. "The shaking will stop when the fighting starts. Your body knows what to do. Trust it. Trust your training. And trust the soldiers beside you." Swallowed hard. "Yes, Sergeant Major, thank you." Stood up and walked away. She did not look back, but she made a mental note to watch that young man during the battle. Some soldiers broke under pressure. Others became stronger. She had a feeling about. Meanwhile, on the flagship, Admiral was meeting with her senior officers. They gathered around a holographic map of the system, studying the enemy positions that their long-range sensors had detected. Intelligence officer pointed to a cluster of red dots near the planet. "These are the ships. Our estimates suggest approximately 200 vessels, ranging from small attack craft to large carrier organisms." "Organisms?" asked one of the captains. "The use living ships, sir. Their vessels are biological, grown rather than built. They are tough and self-repairing, but they are also slower and less maneuverable than our craft." Admiral studied the map with narrow eyes. "What about ground forces?" "Unknown, Admiral. But based on reports from other systems that have attacked, they deploy millions of ground troops. The individual soldiers are about 2 meters tall, with 4 arms and armored skin. They are strong but not intelligent. They follow the commands of larger controller organisms. So we kill the controllers, and the soldiers become confused." "In theory, yes, but we do not know how to identify the controllers from orbit." The Admiral nodded slowly. This was going to be a hard fight. They had numbers on their side and they were fighting on ground they had already taken. But humans had advantages too. Better technology, better training, and something else, something that they probably did not understand. Humans were angry. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing strategy and deployment. When it was finished, Admiral remained alone in the room, staring at the holographic planet. A world that had once been beautiful and was now being consumed by monsters. Her personal communication device buzzed. She looked at it and saw a message from Ensign Sora, her granddaughter. The young woman was serving in the fighter wing, piloting one of the fast attack craft that would be first into battle. The message was short: "Grandmother, I am ready. I will make you proud." Admiral closed her eyes for a moment. She had sent many soldiers into battle over the years. She had watched many of them die, but she had never sent her own blood into harm's way before. Part of her wanted to order Sara to stay behind, to keep her safe. But she knew she could not do that. Sara was a soldier just like every other human on this mission. She had trained for this. She had earned her place. To take that away from her would be wrong. The Admiral typed a reply: "I know you will. Fly fast and come home." She put the device away and looked at the map one more time. In 12 hours, the fleet would jump to hyperspace. In 24 hours, they would arrive at the... In 25 hours, the battle would begin. The humans were coming, and they had no idea what was about to hit them. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a fist punching through paper. One moment, the space above them was empty except for ships. The next moment, 37 human warships appeared in a flash of blue light. Admiral watched from the bridge of the as her tactical display updated. The fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted, clustered around the planet like flies around rotten meat. They had not expected visitors. They had conquered 17 species across 100 years, and no one had ever fought back with force like this. They were about to learn something new. "All ships, this is Admiral, weapons free. Show them what can do." The human ships opened fire, sent metal slugs flying at incredible speeds, punching through like needles through cloth. Missiles streaked across the darkness, their warheads exploding against organic hulls. Laser beams cut and burned and melted. They tried to respond. Their ships turned slowly, their weapons charging, but they were too slow. The humans had trained for centuries to fight faster, harder, and meaner than any enemy. They had conquered peaceful species who did not know how to fight. This was different. This was war against death. Lieutenant led the first fighter attack. She was 30 years old, with short hair and a smile that made her look younger than she was. But there was nothing young about the way she flew her fighter. She moved through space like a dancer, avoiding enemy fire, lining up shots, killing. "Eagle Squadron, follow my lead. We are going for the carrier in Sector 7. Hit the reactor section and get out fast." Her squadron fell in behind her, 12 small ships against a carrier that was bigger than a mountain. The carrier's defenses tried to stop them, firing streams of acid and organic missiles, dodged everything. She had been flying since she was a teenager. She had more hours in a cockpit than most people had hours of sleep. Now, she shouted, "Fire everything." 12 fighters released their weapons at once. Missiles and rounds slammed into the carrier's weak point, tearing through its shell, reaching the living reactor at its heart. The carrier screamed, a sound that traveled through the vacuum on radio frequencies, and then it exploded. "Eagle Squadron, we got it. Moving to next target." But not every attack went perfectly. Ensign Sara, Admiral's granddaughter, was flying in a different squadron when disaster struck. A weapon, something like a living missile, hit her fighter's wing and tore it apart. Alarms screamed in her cockpit. Her ship was spinning, falling toward the planet below. "This is Ensign Sara, I am hit, losing control." On the Admiral heard the transmission. Her face did not change, but her hands gripped the arms of her command chair until her knuckles turned white. "Ensign, can you land?" "I will try, Admiral." Sara's voice was steady, even as her ship burned around her. She had trained for this. She was not going to panic. "I see a clear area near a destroyed city, going in hard." The fighter hit the ground at terrible speed. It bounced, rolled, and finally stopped in a field of gray ash. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the cockpit opened and Sara climbed out, her flight suit torn and bloody but her body still working. She pulled her sidearm and looked around. She was alone on an alien planet surrounded by enemies, but she was alive, and as long as she was alive, she would fight. Miles away, the main Marine force was landing. Sergeant Major stood at the front of the as it screamed through the atmosphere. Her soldiers were seated behind her, their faces tight with fear and excitement. Private was among them, his hands no longer shaking. "Listen up," shouted over the noise. "When those doors open, we move fast. The survivors are hiding in the underground shelters beneath the capital city. Our job is to reach them and establish a safe zone. Kill anything that is not human or questions." There were no questions. They landed with a heavy thud, the doors opened, and the Marines poured out into hell. The ground forces were waiting for them. Hundreds of them, tall warriors with black shells and too many arms. They charged at the humans with mindless fury, clicking and screaming in their alien language. Raised her weapon and started killing. Each shot found its target, dropping a soldier. Her Marines spread out behind her, creating a wall of fire that nothing could pass through. They died by the dozens, their bodies piling up in the gray ash. But there were so many of them. For every one that fell, two more appeared. They came from the ruined buildings, from holes in the ground, from everywhere. Private found himself at the edge of the formation. His weapon was hot from continuous fire. His ammunition was running low, and a group of was circling around, trying to flank him. That was when he saw them, a small group of hiding in a collapsed building. They were children, small and fragile, with feathers that had lost all their color from fear and starvation. They watched him with huge golden eyes, too scared to move or call for help. They saw them too. The soldiers turned toward the building, drawn by some instinct for hunting weak prey. Did not think. He just moved. He ran between thee and the children, putting himself in the path of the monsters. He raised his weapon and fired again and again, hitting targets even as they came closer. One got past his fire. It swung a clawed arm at his chest, cutting through his armor and drawing blood, screamed in pain but did not fall. He pulled his combat knife and stabbed the creature in what he hoped was a vital area. It collapsed. More were coming. Knew he could not hold them all, but he stood his ground anyway, bleeding and exhausted, because behind him were children who could not fight for themselves. Then the sky lit up with fire. Commander, watching from orbit on the, had seen the situation developing. He had calculated the firing solution for a precision strike, the mathematics running through his mind faster than any computer. And now that solution was being delivered. Kinetic rounds from space hit the formation with the force of bombs. The ground shook. Aliens died in waves, and Private was still standing when the dust cleared, surrounded by dead enemies, still protecting children he had never met before. Reached him a minute later. She looked at the bodies, at the wounded young man, at the children who were now slowly coming out of hiding. "Private," she said, "that was either the bravest or the thing I have ever seen." Managed a weak smile. "Maybe both, Sergeant Major." She almost laughed, almost. "Get yourself to medical and then get back to fighting. We are not done yet." The battle continued for 19 hours. The humans pushed forward through ruined cities, clearing buildings one by one, hunting down every they could find. The survivors emerged from hiding, unable to believe what they were seeing. Aliens from the death world, the monsters from their childhood stories, were saving them. On the engineer worked without sleep. His ship took heavy damage from an attack, and he had to seal breaches in the hull with his own hands while the metal was still hot. He burned himself badly but kept working because his ship needed to keep fighting. In space, Lieutenant flew until her muscles ached and her eyes burned. She lost count of how many enemy ships she destroyed. She lost count of how many friends she watched die. But she kept flying because that was her job. And on the surface, Ensign Sarah made her way through the destruction until she found other human soldiers. She was wounded and exhausted, but she picked up a rifle from a dead Marine and joined the fight. Her grandmother had taught her that duty came before everything, even survival. When the sun rose over the after 19 hours of battle, The armada was destroyed. Their ground forces were scattered and dying, and the humans were still standing. They had won. News of the battle traveled across the galaxy like a shockwave. Every species with communication technology heard about what had happened at The recordings spread from system to system, showing human warships tearing through the fleet, showing human soldiers fighting on the ground, showing the impossible victory. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the great circular chamber on the council. They had come to discuss the most shocking event in 300 years. The humans had broken quarantine. High Chancellor stood at the center of the chamber. He was an ancient creature made of living crystal, his body glowing with soft blue light. He had led the council for 2 centuries, guiding it through wars and disasters and difficult decisions. But even he seemed uncertain now. "We must address the situation carefully," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The humans have violated the quarantine that this council established 300 years ago. They have entered sovereign space and engaged in military action." "Military action that saved shouted a voice from the upper seats. The speaker was a large furry being from a species known for their trading skills. "They were going to eat them all, and we did nothing." "We could not risk our own worlds," said another representative, a slim creature with large black eyes. "They are too dangerous. Intervention would have spread the conflict." "So we left them to die," the trader shot back. "We left them to be food. And the humans, the species we locked away because they were too dangerous, they came and fought while we hid behind our borders." The chamber erupted in argument. Different species shouted at each other, defending their actions or attacking others. High Chancellor raised his hands for silence, but it took several minutes before the noise died down. "There is someone who should speak," he said finally. "Ambassador of the has requested to address the council." The chamber went quiet. All eyes turned to the entrance as a small bird-like figure walked in. It was the same ambassador who had sent the desperate message to Earth. Her feathers had regained some of their color, and she walked with a strength that had not been there before. She climbed to the speaking platform in the center of the chamber and looked around at all the watching faces. "3 months ago," she began, "I stood in the ruins of my world and watched my people die. They were everywhere. They burned our cities. They killed our children. They ate the bodies of our loved ones." Her voice was steady, but there was a hardness in it now. "I begged this council for help. Do you remember what you said?" No one answered. "You said it was too dangerous. You said you were sorry. You said you would remember us fondly." She let the words hang in the air. "And then you closed your communication channels and left us to our deaths." "Ambassador," High Chancellor started to speak. "I am not finished." His voice was sharp. "When no one would help us, I did something desperate. I sent a message to the one species that everyone fears, the humans, the monsters from the death world." She paused and looked around the chamber. "Do you know what happened when they received our message? They did not debate. They did not calculate risks. They did not ask what they would gain from helping us. Within hours, their entire fleet was moving. Thousands of their soldiers volunteered to fight and die for a species they had never met." The chamber was completely silent now. "I watched those humans fight. I saw them charge into swarms without hesitation. I saw them put themselves between our children and the monsters. I saw them bleed and die to save us." Feathers shimmered with emotion. One young human soldier, barely more than a child himself, stood alone against dozens to protect a group of children he had never seen before. He was cut and wounded, but he did not run. He did not stop fighting until every child was safe. She turned to face High Chancellor directly. "You called them monsters. You locked them away from the rest of the galaxy because you were afraid of what they might do. But when my people were dying, those monsters came to save us. And you civilized species, you cultured and peaceful beings, you turned away." The silence stretched on. Some representatives looked ashamed, Others looked angry. A few were quietly crying. Finally, High Chancellor spoke. "What would you have us do, Ambassador?" "End the quarantine," said immediately. "Open the borders. Let the humans join the galactic community. They have proven that they are not mindless killers. They have proven that they have honor and courage and compassion. They deserve to be treated as equals." "But they are still dangerous," protested a representative from a small, peaceful species. "Their strength, their aggression, their history of violence." "Yes," agreed. "They are dangerous. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They are stronger than us, faster than us, more resilient than us. But they are also brave and loyal and good. Is that not what we should want from our allies?" The debate continued for hours. Some species supported ending the quarantine. Others were too afraid. Many were simply confused, their understanding of humans completely changed by what had happened. Finally, Admiral was given permission to address the council via communication link. Her face appeared on the great screen above the chamber, calm and steady as always. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, "I understand your fear of us. For 300 years you have told stories about humans, about how we kill for sport, about how we conquered our planet through violence, about how we are too dangerous to be trusted." She paused. "Some of those stories are true. We are violent. We have fought wars against each other. We have done terrible things in our history." Her eyes moved across the watching faces. "But we have also done wonderful things. We have protected the weak. We have stood against evil. We have risked everything for strangers who needed help." She leaned forward slightly. "We do not want to conquer you. We do not want your territory or your resources. We have been alone for 300 years, and honestly, we have done quite well for ourselves. But we never wanted to be alone. We always hoped that someday the galaxy would see us as something more than monsters." "Then what do you want?" asked High Chancellor. "The same thing any species wants: friends, allies, a place in the universe where we belong." Admiral smiled slightly. "And maybe the chance to help when someone needs it. That seems to be something we are good at." The vote was held that evening. It was close, closer than many expected. But in the end, a majority of the council voted to end the quarantine. After 300 years, humans would be allowed to join the galactic community. When the result was announced, cheering erupted from the section of the chamber. Ambassador wept tears of joy. Throughout human space, people celebrated as the news reached them. On the Admiral received a message from her granddaughter. Ensign Sara was in the medical bay, recovering from her injuries, but she had recorded a short video. "We did it, grandmother," Sara said in the recording, smiling despite the bandages on her face. "We really did it. We saved them, and now the galaxy knows who we are." Admiral watched the video 3 times. Then she saved it to her personal files and went back to work. There was still much to do. They were defeated but they still existed somewhere out there. And now that humans were part of the galactic community, they would be called upon to help again. They had answered one call for help. They would answer as many as it took. 6 months had passed since the battle. There was still from the war, but it was healing. New buildings rose where old ones had fallen. Fields that had been burned were now showing the first green shoots of new plants. And everywhere, humans worked together. Captain stood on a balcony in the rebuilt capital city, looking at the sunset. The sky was blue again, though sometimes it still showed traces of gray from the fires. His ship, had been repaired and upgraded. He was supposed to return to Earth soon, but he kept finding reasons to stay a little longer. Lieutenant brought him a cup of tea and stood beside him. They did not speak for a while, just watching the sky change colors. "It is beautiful here," finally said. "It is," agreed. "Hard to believe this place was almost destroyed 6 months ago." "They are strong. They are rebuilding faster than anyone expected." "They have help." Took a sip of his tea. I heard that engineer is staying behind to work on their power systems. He says he wants to teach them how to build better reactors. Smiled. I think he just likes arguing with their technicians. I saw him yesterday, shouting about cooling systems, and three were shouting back. I think they have become friends. Down in the streets below, Corporal was playing with a group of children. He had been promoted after his bravery in the battle, but the scars on his chest still ached sometimes. The children did not care about his scars. They just wanted to learn the game he was teaching them. It was a simple game involving a ball and two goals. The children were terrible at it because their bodies were not built for running and kicking. But they laughed and chirped with joy every time someone scored, and laughed with them. Sergeant Major watched from a distance. She had stayed on the planet to help train the in self-defense. It was slow work because they were not natural fighters, but they were learning and had discovered that she enjoyed teaching more than she had expected. She walked over too, as the children took a break. "You are good with them," she said. "They remind me of my little sister back on Earth," replied. "She used to follow me around and ask me to play games all the time. You should call her, let her know you are still alive." "I did," she cried for 20 minutes. He smiled sadly. Then she told me she was proud of me. Nodded, she understood. Every soldier here had family back home, people who loved them, people who had worried about them during the battle. Some families had received bad news. Many human soldiers had died defending them, but the survivors carried on because that was what humans did. In the new government building, intelligence officer was meeting with her counterpart, a young named. They had been working together to establish the first formal agreements between humans and trade routes, communication protocols, mutual defense plans. There was much to do. But right now, they were not talking about business. "I do not understand," said, holding a small device that played human music. "Why do your songs make such loud noises? Is this supposed to be pleasant?" Laughed. "That is called rock music. Some humans find it very pleasant. Others prefer quieter sounds." "But why would anyone want to hear this? It sounds like an engine exploding." "That is actually a compliment for some musicians." Made a confused chirping sound that had learned meant disbelief. "Humans are very strange." "You have no idea," replied with a grin. "Wait until I show you what we call action movies." On the rebuilt spaceport, Ensign Sara was preparing for a patrol flight. Her injuries had healed, though she would carry scars for the rest of her life. She did not mind. Every scar was a reminder that she had fought for something important. Her grandmother had returned to Earth weeks ago, but Sara had requested to stay with the permanent garrison. She liked this planet. She liked its people, and she liked knowing that she was here to protect them if they ever came back. A mechanic approached her ship, making final checks on the engines. He was an older male with gray feathers and careful hands. "Your ship is ready, Ensign," he said. "I added extra fuel cells as you requested." "Thank you," Sara smiled at him. "You do good work." "I learned from your engineer. He is loud and demanding, but his methods are sound." The mechanic hesitated. "May I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you come? Your people had no reason to help us. We had rejected you. We had voted to lock you away from the galaxy. Why did you risk your lives for us?" Sora thought about the question. It was something many had asked, and she still was not sure she had a perfect answer. "Because you asked," she said finally. "Because you needed help, because we could do something about it." She looked up at the sky where the stars were starting to appear. Humans have a saying, "No one is truly alone as long as someone is willing to help." We did not want you to be alone. The mechanic's feathers shimmered with emotion. "That is a good saying." "We have a lot of good sayings. Remind me to tell you more sometime." Back at the balcony, Captain and Lieutenant were joined by Ambassador. She looked healthier now, her feathers bright and beautiful again. But there was a new hardness in her eyes that had not been there before the war. "Captain Park," she said, I wanted to speak with you before you returned to Earth." Of course, Ambassador. Stood beside him, looking at the same sunset. "My people have a concept that is difficult to translate into your language. It is something like a debt that cannot be repaid, a bond that connects two beings forever." "I think I understand," said. "When I sent that message to Earth, I expected nothing. I thought I was throwing words into empty space, hopping for a miracle. I did not really believe anyone would come." She turned to face him. "But you came, all of you. You fought and bled and died for us. How can we ever repay that?" Shook his head. "We did not do it for payment, Ambassador. We did it because it was right." "I know, that is what makes it even harder." His voice was soft. "So I must ask, what do you need from us? Not payment, but something we can give. Something that would make us feel less like we owe you everything and more like we are partners." The captain thought about the question for a long time. He thought about Earth, so far away. He thought about the 300 years of loneliness. He thought about all the humans who had dreamed of finding friends among the stars. "Maybe just friends," he said. "Real friends who trust each other, who help each other, who share their lives and their cultures and their futures." His feathers shimmered, the equivalent of a smile. "That," she said, "we can do." The sun finished setting and the stars came out. Somewhere among those stars, other species were watching. Some were afraid of the humans. Some were curious. Some were wondering if they too could call upon thee if they ever needed help. The quarantine was over. The walls were down, and humanity was finally truly part of the galaxy. Captain finished his tea and looked up at the stars. "You know," he said too, "I think this is the beginning of something good." Lieutenant nodded. "I think so too, sir." Far above them, the ships of the human fleet orbited peacefully. They were watchful, always ready, because humans had made a promise, an unspoken vow that spread across their entire species. They would answer any call for help. They would stand against any darkness. They would protect any innocent who needed protecting. They had found their purpose, and the galaxy would never be the same.